Good afternoon, colleagues. Welcome and welcome back to day 2 of the Department of Economics Conference on the Economy. Yesterday, we had an intriguing and intense day of discussions on the CARICOM Commission's report, which was then followed by exploring the potential of accelerating Caribbean development, retooling and restructuring Caribbean economics post-COVID-19. Under the topic of manufacturing. Today, we look forward to a continuation of this rigor of discussions and the presentations by focusing on the topics of cultural industries and the blue economy, which I have the pleasure of chairing. I am Ms. Malini Maraj, Assistant Lecturer in the Department of Economics, and on behalf of the department, I welcome you again. To begin today's proceedings, the department would like to highlight some very important activities that have become integral to the conference, the COTE youth events. This year, the COTE youth events included a youth armchair discussion held on the 14th of October, a secondary school debate held on the 21st of October, and the tertiary school debate held on November 11th. The COTE youth events were sponsored by First Citizens Trinidad and Tobago. We will begin by looking at and highlighting the secondary school debate, which discussed the motion of be it resolved that high-stakes examinations hinders students' creativity and innovation. The winners of this secondary school debate were Presentation College Chaguanas students, Mr. Akshay Ramlogan, Mr. S.A. Mohammed, and Mr. Gerald Edwards. The runners-up of the secondary school debate were Northgate College students, Reagan Wilson, Sierra Rodden, Zaya Lamont Harper, and Christopher Williams. The tertiary school debate discussed the motion, be it resolved that mandatory vaccination against COVID-19 virus is necessary for accelerating recovery for Caribbean SIDS. The winners of this tertiary school debate were University of the West Indies students, Team Delta, including Elan Bullard, Aishwarya Maharaj, Kale Sylvester, Shanika John, and Maya Joseph. The runners-up for the tertiary school debate were Team Alpha of the University of the West Indies, including Adana Stout, Ali Mohammed, Priyanka Rimol, Tishwana Glasgow, Maya Joseph, and Esselon Dumont. The respective prizes were $3,500 for winners of both debates and $2,500 for the runners-up of both debates. Special mention is made to the schools who also participated in the debates, which include Queen's Royal College, Swaha Hindu College, University of the Southern Caribbean, and UWI Roytech. We would also like to acknowledge the participants of the armchair discussion, which contained a mixture of both secondary school and tertiary school students. And they discussed the theme, Accelerating Caribbean Development, a youth-centric development approach. This was moderated by Dr. Kellen Bubb of the Bubb Report. The students that participated were Mr. Gershom Bing, Ms. Varsha Ramdeo, Mr. Lorenzo Sahadeo, Ms. Sage Mitchell, and Mr. Gerald Edwards. So we would like to congratulate all of the participants and acknowledge their contributions in the COTE events and the COTE conference as a whole. With that being recognized, we would now have a brief recap of yesterday's discussion by Mr. Rashad Karamath, a member of the Economic Society of the University of the West Indies. Mr. Karamath?
Hi, good afternoon, everyone. My name is Rashad, a student here at the University of the West Indies. And before we begin today's proceedings, please allow me to recap yesterday's session. In the opening ceremony, both the Dean, Faculty of Social Sciences, and Head of the Department of Economics welcome participants to this 15th iteration of the Conference of the Economy under the theme Accelerating Caribbean Development, Retooling and Restructuring Caribbean Economies Post-COVID-19. The Dean highlighted the importance of discussions of this nature as we continue to grapple with the socio-economic uncertainties associated with the COVID-19 pandemic and the need for a multi-pronged response for the positive transformation of Caribbean economies. The first session of the conference, chaired by Dr. Darren Conrad, featured the chairman of CARICOM Commission on the Economy, Professor Avinash Prasad, and a member of the commission, Mr. Gregory Maguire, who brought insights into the CARICOM Commission's report. Professor Prasad highlighted the role and the approach of the Commission in the development challenges of the region. He indicated that the Commission identified 3 reasons why previous Commission reports failed to make any development. These reasons are: number 1, the popular narrative of squabbling and disagreement amongst countries of CARICOM. Second, too many goals and objectives of CARICOM. Third, money issues. He identified that the Commission sought to address these issues through enhanced cooperation, subsidiarity, and identifying interventions that did not require money. Mr. Maguire provided a bit more insight into the aspect of education with the Caribbean region, in which our current reality provides an excellent opportunity to develop Caribbean content and create employment. The subject of colloquial education, overshadowing regional teachings and concepts, was highlighted, and Mr. Maguire emphasized the role of digital platforms as opposed to infrastructure in the transformation of Caribbean economies. Both speakers encouraged participants to read the report presented by the Commission. The second session, chaired by Dr. Henry Bailey, paid specific attention to the manufacturing sector. The session's panelists, Mr. Mark Hill, Dr. Mahindra Ramesh Ramdeen, and Mr. John Mafood, brought a range of perspectives from across the region, namely Barbados, Jamaica, and Trinidad and Tobago. In his presentation, Mr. Hill provided insights on the success of the life science sector, the introduction of fermentation innovation in Barbados, and highlighted key measures to supplement this industry, which included a Science and Biotechnology Global Council authorized by the Barbados government, International Life Sciences and Biotechnology Accelerator operated to highest global standards, full intellectual property protection worldwide, and a high-quality life science infrastructure and talented workforce. Dr. Ramdeen, in his review of the manufacturing sector in Trinidad and Tobago, credited the measures of the government of Trinidad and Tobago, such as the reopening of industries such as food and beverage, pharmaceuticals, which make up 50% of manufacturers, and the introduction of innovative health measures to curb virus spread, such as promotion of mask wearing and hand sanitizing, as strategic and critical in sustaining the manufacturing sector of Trinidad and Tobago. He emphasized that there's an opportunity to pivot towards digitization, develop and build trade and regional integration efficiency, which will in turn result in economies of scale. The third presenter, Mr. John Mafood, examined the historical context of the Jamaican manufacturing sector and its current state given the COVID-19 pandemic. He highlighted that while the growing inflation rate, devaluation of currency, and high interest rates continue to impact the sector, there were few positives. Change in Jamaica's shipping costs allow product costs to be more competitive. Increased efficiency in a number of companies, the development of a junior stock exchange, and a shift in the conservative culture of Jamaican companies with increased strategic planning and increased profitable engagement in stock exchange. The final presenter of the day, Ms. Therese Lichan, focused on a multi-criteria optimization of the Point Lisas industrial estate in Trinidad and Tobago, in which she concluded there is potential to reuse waste material through the use of industrial symbiosis and increased collaboration, and should be used as an eco-park. She briefly highlighted the benefits of industrial symbiosis, which includes that it reduces CO2 emissions and landfill costs, the use of virgin resources, the use of industrial water. While pollution increases, there are profitability, job creation, utilization of assets, inward investments, and innovation. These were the key takeaway and discussion points discussed in yesterday's session. Thank you for allowing me to share the recap of this conference.
Thank you for that very thorough and interesting recap, Rashad. But before we continue these exciting discussions, we would have a word from our sponsors.
Stop your bow, Mr. Fiddler. Oh, hi. This country so colorful and truly diverse. We're doing our best to put TNT first. Youth success through advancement, we encourage. We proudly supporting the rich cultural heritage, promoting development in the sporting arena, and empowering women for equality of gender. We sustaining the environment and strengthening the society. First citizens helping paint a brighter TNT. Drag your bow, Mr. Fiddler.
Some of the most special things in life take time to come to fruition. And when they do, the rewards can enrich lives for generations to come. The wait is so worth it. Contact the UTC today and get growing.
At the Inter-American Development Bank in Trinidad and Tobago, we are proud to have a diverse team of professionals representing various disciplines and nationalities who work collaboratively with local stakeholders to improve the lives of citizens in TNT. The IDB Group consists of 3 windows. IDB Lab, which supports the development of innovative micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. IDB Invest, which provides loans to larger private sector entities for development initiatives. And IDB, which engages with the government to implement strategic priorities by providing loans, technical assistance, research, and advice. Please take the time to learn more about our work, jobs at the IDB Group, events, and financing opportunities by following @CN Coburn RepTT on social media.
In the blink of an eye, the world changed forever.
El gobierno dará a conocer en las próximas horas una serie de medidas sanitarias y económicas para seguir enfrentando la pandemia.
Una reunión con el presidente y el jefe de gobierno.
A global crisis of unprecedented proportions, from which no country has escaped. In Latin America, we have faced many challenging times, some more difficult than others. But today, we all understand that solidarity is our biggest strength. "50 years ago, CAF was created with a mission. 5 Andean countries united to promote sustainable development and regional integration, thus improving quality of life and boosting productivity. Today, we are composed by 19 countries and account for over 600 million people. And despite the distance and the barriers that separate us, we must work more united than ever, because only together we will succeed. The world will not be the same, but now we have the opportunity to build an even better one, a more harmonious, cleaner, and efficient planet. And for the challenges that lie ahead, at CAF, we want to say 3 words. here we are. To build together a region of opportunities, especially for the most vulnerable ones, with infrastructure that improves quality of life and increases connectivity. A region of vibrant cities, of entrepreneurs and businesses committed to their communities, of societies respectful with the natural world that we all share and must care for. At CAF, we have walked along a region for 50 years on its road to progress. Now more than ever, here we are. And here we will remain, firm in our commitment of being the development bank of Latin America.
It comes naturally to us. Unstoppable energy. We share it. We use it to live better, longer, smarter, to manifest a future where energy takes new forms and is used in new ways that can enrich life for all of us. The new age of energy is here.
And as usual, we would like to extend our greatest appreciation to all of our sponsors. Now we're moving on to session 3, which looks at cultural industries. I said that today is a particularly exciting day because in today's sessions, we look at new sectors of the economy, untraditional sectors of the economy that we have recognized that can be as important as energy, as manufacturing, and as agriculture. So with that, I would like to introduce Dr. Joanne Tull, who would be the chair of session 3 on cultural industries. Dr. Joanne Tull is an academic, a researcher, and consultant in Caribbean creative economy development with particular interest in festival statistics, cultural heritage and development, cultural industries, impacts, and creative entrepreneurship and strategy. She is currently completing 2 manuscripts, one on the Caribbean creative and cultural economy, titled Caribbean Cultural Economy Anthology with Dr. Deborah Hicking Gordon, which is forthcoming, and the other, a digital text entitled The Business of the Arts Cape Guide with Mr. Farley Joseph. She has also written and published in the area of festival event evaluation and cultural resources. Dr. Tull is currently the academic coordinator of the undergraduate Carnival Studies program, as well as the postgraduate diploma ACEM Arts, Culture and Enterprise Management at the Department of Creative and Festival Arts at the University of the West Indies St. Augustine campus. At the undergraduate level, she teaches the economics of culture, enterprise internships for the arts, festival management, festival project and cultural research methods, and at the postgraduate level, arts, culture and society, and project development. With that, I would like to introduce and invite Dr. Joanne Tull as chair of session 3 to join us.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon. Thanks very much for that introduction, Malini. Good afternoon to everyone out there. Welcome once more to COTE 2021. And once more, we are happy to have a panel featured here on the cultural industries. As we all know, the cultural industries is perhaps one of those marginalized industrial bases of the Caribbean at this particular time on account of the pandemic. But if you really know about our sector, you would appreciate that we did have some marginalization for quite some time. Notwithstanding, it is a sector that has tremendous potential. And as a matter of fact, we like to consider that we do indeed have a Caribbean creative economy. And having said that, I would want that our audience would appreciate most certainly that this segment of our wider regional economy has significant potential and there is opportunity lying there for us in the region with regard to our futures, especially in this pandemic context. So without further ado, I would most certainly like to introduce my panelists today, who will certainly give a healthy and robust discussion around our futures in the Caribbean with regard to the cultural and creative industries. I want to begin first by introducing Mr. Keith Kirk. Keith has worked in the music business since 2008, specifically in the area of metadata. He has worked with companies such as Universal Music Group, Sony Music Entertainment, BMG, Cobalt, the International Copyright Enterprise based in Berlin, Germany, 21st Century Fox, National Geographic, Tova Music Group, the November Society, and PPL UK. Metadata is key to the overall digital music strategy for any artist. Keith says your success in music is directly determined and proportionately predicated on the quality of your metadata. Keith has previously hosted, presented, and guested on various webinars, taught and or lectured at educational institutions such as the Berklee College of Music, our very own, the University of the West Indies, as well as the University of the Southern Caribbean. In the winter of 2017, Keith recorded the entire original movie underscore for Marvel's highly successful feature film, Black Panther, with 24 London session singers at the famed Abbey Road Studios under the direction of Ludwig Göransson and John Ashton Thomas. Welcome, Kirk. You're welcome. I would also like to introduce Mr. Harold Davis. Harold Davis is a trained industrial engineer with over 25 years of experience in industrial development. His areas of specialization include creative industries, innovation, development finance, agriculture, business development, energy management, and micro, small, and medium-sized entities, as we know familiarly called MSME. He is a specialist in MSME clustering development and management and business innovation models, as well as development strategies in that area. Mr. Davis is the Deputy Chief Executive Officer at Jamaica Business Development Corporation and has served in this capacity since 2001. Prior to joining the JBDC, he served in the capacity of Technical Services Director of the Productivity Center at Jamaica Promotions Corporation, known as JAMPRO, and also as Industrial Engineer at Exim Bank of Jamaica. Mr. Davis is the Chief Judge for National Commercial Bank's SME Nation Builder Awards, which seeks to recognize successful entrepreneurs who contribute to nation building. Harold Davis, I'm happy to also announce, is a musician, singer, songwriter, and recording artist with 2 studio albums released. I'm most certainly bringing in my esteemed panel today is Mr. Stephen Hignell. Stephen is a London-based international creative industries and social enterprise expert, specializing in strategy, economics, policy, evaluation, and impact. With over 13 years of international creative economy experience, Stephen consults globally for clients such as the British Council, Arts Council England, Jamaica Business Development Corporation, Design Center of the Philippines, UK Theatre, Theatres Trust, Creative Scotland, Greater London Authority, Global Affairs Canada, among others. He has led cultural strategies across the globe and has supported creative economy development in Colombia, Iraq, Ireland, Jamaica, Kenya, Pakistan, Philippines, Saudi Arabia, and Vietnam. And I hope that I see more Caribbean islands added to that list very soon. He is a social and creative enterprise advisor for the Bootstrap Entrepreneurship Program, lead monitoring and evaluation consultant for the British Council's Cultural Heritage for Inclusive Growth Program, and advisor for social and creative enterprises for the British Council's Developing Inclusive Creative Economies Program, known as DICE. He is a trustee at the Raise Collective and former vice chair of Rowan Arts. Stephen is a fiscal incentives advisor to UK and a funding educator for the foundation assisting Canadian talent on Recordings Factor, Breakout West, Music PI, and Sask Music. I would like you to all welcome my panelists today. I think we have an esteemed group here. I am very happy to be chairing this panel. I must say, I kind of, as the Trinis would say, fall in, and they all somehow dovetail with the work that I do. So what we're going to do first is have each of them speak for about 10 minutes, giving me their thoughts and certainly sharing with us or their ideas on this Caribbean creative economy and what they think about that in this new context. Keith Kerr, you may begin.
Okay, so thank you, everyone. Hope you're hearing me and seeing my screen clearly.
Yes, we are.
Good. So, so happy to be here. This is such an important topic, such a relevant topic to what's happening today. I'm just going to give like a short presentation on my ideas and just, you know, what I think of what should happen in the creative economy in the Caribbean, et cetera, et cetera. So I've titled it Data and Economic Lifeline, because I think with everything that's happening right now and, you know, everything that's going on, you know, data and the management of this, the curation of this and all that stuff can give a massive lifeline to any economy right now, right? In this new economy, three groups will essentially have particularly advantaged. Those who can work well with work creatively well with intelligent machines, those who are the best at what they do, and those with access to capital. And in music, and I've experienced, I'm also a musician, etc. Music and anything creative is always the first thing to get chopped. The funding is always the first thing to get chopped. But then in a downturn, an economic downturn or recession or anything like that, it's the first thing everyone turns to. So why is capital being cut? That's a very important thing that we need to understand. I think we need to really look at, just as much as we pump money into oil and gas and to housing and all these different things, we really need to look at the amount of money that we are pumping into the creative sector, right? So from the IDB, I saw this last night, and this is so perfectly sums up what I'm talking about. You know, data is the lifeblood of decision making and the raw material for accountability, right? Without high quality data, providing the right information for the right things at the right time, designing, monitoring, and evaluating effective policies becomes almost impossible. And this is like, they could not be more spot on with this, right? Data makes everything work. Data gives such valuable information. Data lets you know what has happened in the past, what's happening now, and based on the data, what you need to do to move forward, right? So I so believe that more than anything else, we need to build out structures, systems, put systems in place that actually monitor the data of literally everything, from traffic conditions to weather to schools. Like, data needs to be a part of that. And of course, in the creative sector, we want to monitor what's happening within the entire creative sector body and within the subsections of the sector. And I think there's three things that we need to do: track, trace, evaluate. So anything that we're doing within the creative sector and within the subsections of each of the creative sector, we've got to track everything, trace everything, and evaluate everything. So, you know, a lot of times we try to export the things we create and push it out and market it and promote it, right? Then it gets out into the market, but we're not doing a very good job of tracking what happens when it goes out there, tracing where it's gone, and then getting data to feed back to us so we can evaluate if it's worked, if it has worked, if it's reached the right demographic, if it reached the right audience, if it was monetized, how it was monetized, and how we can monetize it better. So all those different points, I think, you know, we need to kind of start thinking about how we send our stuff out there. So Carnival, for instance, right? You know, if we want to export Carnival, are we tracking it? Are we tracing it? And then are we able to evaluate how it's done when it goes out there, being the music, being the Carnival session itself, etc. Having the Carnival being broadcast on, like, for instance, the BBC and other networks, probably creating a documentary or film or show around Carnival and delivering that to Netflix, for instance, right? Can this work? And how do we monetize that? Do we license that out to different networks? So many different things that we can do, right? And then once we're thinking along those lines, we want to build or license robust digital systems or plug and play into systems that already exist so that we can track, trace, and evaluate, right? So there are many systems out there that you can literally plug and play into if you don't really want to build it from scratch. You can plug and play into so many systems to help you evaluate, monitor, track, trace, curate, collect information about what we're creating and how we're monetizing what we're creating, right? And this is all digital. Like, you don't even need to leave your room. I mean, we're having this conference on Zoom right now, so that gives you an idea, right? And then, of course, use the systems to make informed decisions, right? So everything that's going out, everything we're creating, everything we're monetizing, everything that we're building, you know, any idea that we conceptualize, we should be able to monetize it. And then through monetizing and exporting, et cetera, having data come back so that we know, okay, 3 years ago, we made this amount of money, and these were the parameters around which that happened. Based on this data and where we are now, we think we need to change this, tweak this, move that, put that up here, change that up there, export it this way, and then send it out. This is really going to help us. Now, I know a lot of this is happening already in a lot of places, locally and throughout the region, but this is just talking about really bolstering this and focusing on this a lot more, because everything is data-driven, right? For example, the UK creative industry sector in 2018 was worth $111 billion, right? Sorry, pounds. I've been living in Trinidad too long. 111 billion pounds, right? 2018, and with export value of 35 billion, right? So just little information like this helps you to understand, okay, this is what we did compared to, we're in 2021 now, in 2018, this is what we brought into the economy, right? And these are just an idea of the sub categories within the creative sector. So you have advertising, marketing, craft, design, video, publishing, museums, galleries. This is another thing that I think we should really look at in the region: music, performing arts, and visual, etc. Right? These are very clearly defined subsections within the music creative sector, and they're all looked at with their own sort of subsets of data that comes in and feeds in to let the entire sector know what's happening and how things are performing, right? So I want us to start to think about owning and controlling our digital space. As I said before, You know, a lot of times we put stuff out there onto the internet and to Google and all these things, and we've got websites and all these things, right? But do we actually, are we owning and controlling what we're putting out there? Meaning, do we know that having this website, how in fact is it working for me? How am I making money or monetizing from this? Am I reaching my potential audience? Am I reaching the right people? Are people buying into my product, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera? So we need to own it and understand it so that we can make those informed decisions. Particularly as it pertains to the music business has taken this on in massive leaps and bounds. We still need to do better, but I'm seeing a lot of progress happening. You know, the music business is a data-driven, algorithmic, digital landscape. Everything is digital right now. So the music business has developed systems to facilitate all this digital data, right? There are about 7 million artists globally, right? 100 million songs are uploaded to DSPs, digital service providers, every year. You're talking about billions of streams of data and billions of lines of streams and trillions of lines of data that has to be looked at, made sense of, and then paid out to copyright owners, for instance, right? So metadata is the key that unlocks a lot of this data. And it's the key, metadata is the key to transferring any generated revenues to artists. What is metadata? It's simply defined as information about other information, or one set of information that defines and explains or contextualizes another set of information. So you have artist name, you got song title, you got duration, you got genre, and you got the publishing information, right? But that's on its own makes no sense, right? So you got artist name, you know, Marshall Montano, song title, Mr. Fett, I think it is, duration, 3 minutes, 5 seconds, genre, soca, or in this instance, there isn't really a soca genre, which is another thing, but reggae or whatever, or world. And then you got this publishing information, which his publishing company is Masuso Publishing. So that second bit of information contextualizes the first. And this entire mechanism is what the music business is predicated on. Without this, there is no music business, simply stated, right? And so what I've realized living in Trinidad for the past 2 years, that this is a major problem locally, but the information is getting out there. So COTE has now got on board with the ISRC codes and all these things, which I'm going to talk about too next. So the ISRC code, again, is sort of like a birth paper for a song. So if anybody releases a song into the digital space, it must be accompanied by something called an ISRC code. As you can see here, this is the breakdown of how it works. You've got the UK country code, you got a first registrant code, which is a 3-digit alphanumeric code that is unique to you and that specific song, the year of publication, and then the designation code. So for instance, in Trinidad, you'll have TT and then AAA 05 and then 00001. This code, embedded into this code, is information about that song. The copyright owner, the publishing information, the singer, the songwriter, the mixing engineer. You can embed a whole bunch of information in there, right? And this helps you track and trace and then evaluate how that piece of music has performed. And it helps you see, okay, it's been exploited in this territory, in Africa, in Asia, in wherever, and this is where I need to do what I need to do for the future to improve on that, right? But there's also something called the UPC code. The UPC and the ISRC are husband and wife team. Now, very quickly, here's the thing. When an artist delivers music to the DSPs, the digital aggregator like one of these companies here, DistroKid, CD Baby, etc., they will ask you, do you have an ISRC code, or would you like us to give you one? Most people don't have their own ISRC code. So they will take the ISRC from the digital distributor, like DistroKid or CD Baby. Nothing wrong with this, but here's the issue. When you go into a supermarket or whatever, right? Let's say you go into Massey stores, you pick up a box of cornflakes and you turn it on the side, you will generally see this symbol here. It's called a UPC code, Universal Product Code, right? And when that is scanned by the teller, information will come up about the manufacturer who created that specific box of cornflakes, right? Which means that that manufacturer has to get paid, essentially, right? It may not flow like that, but that's the general idea. That manufacturer has to get paid. So when an artist distributes his music through a digital aggregator, the aggregator's name is on or is embedded in this code. That's where the problem lies. You are the manufacturer of that song, so your name should be in this UPC code. So what is happening now is that there's been a slight shift in the music business where artists can now have their own names or company names embedded into this code, so that when the digital distributor scans this code, you're going to see Marshall Montano or Malini Maharaj or Joanne Tull, right? You're going to see that name, which means by law, any revenues generated from that product must go to that name or that person's entity. This is critical, right, to understanding what's happening with your product. And these codes can be attributed to audiobooks and podcasts and any type of audio that you create. These can be attributed to that product, right? And where you get those codes is from this organization called GS1. GS1 is a global organization that issues barcodes for products globally. If you look around your home and you see a barcode on a product in your home, just think that it came from GS1. All right. I just want to put these kind of other words out there that we need to start thinking about as well. Identifiers, blockchain, NFT, crypto, e-commerce, digital ownership. I know we've all been talking about the digital economy, etc. So we really need to start understanding this, learning this, and trying to see how it can work for us. There's no excuse that we're in the Caribbean right now. We have access to all of this, all of it. And I think this is one of the many ways that when we start thinking in this way, the digital space, the digital economy, owning our digital space, etc., is really going to help us move forward in a positive way. Just some stats on the music business and some not so good stats, because we don't adequately own our digital products or our digital space, and everything's not in place. Publishing an estimated 46 million unclaimed copyrights worth billions of dollars. And I can guarantee any soca artists, Calypsonians, they have forever had money sitting out there that they've never been able to access, right? Recorded music worth 15 billion lost every year due to bad metadata, inaccurate metadata, or missing metadata or data, right? And this is the worst one. Uncollected royalties, an estimated 700,000 inoperable databases. Inoperable, meaning they're not working. You can't access the data. Just sitting there, stored with data around the world worth billions of dollars. Billions. And I guarantee that our artists, our local artists and creatives, you've got money sitting out there that you have never had access to. So this is not a regional problem, but it's a global issue that we all have to look at and see how we can rectify. All right, so thank you so much. And that's it for me.
Thank you very much for that, Keith. I have 1 or 2 questions for you. So we'll swing back to that, but we can most certainly now I believe we can have Stephen come now and give us his 10 minutes of thought and introspection on the subject.
Great, thank you. Okay, excellent. So this chimes very nicely with what we've been discussing today, and the flow of conversation from Keith and Joanne blends very nicely with what we are about to talk to. But first, I'm just going to say I noticed that the weather in Trinidad and Tobago is 26 degrees Celsius. In London right now, it is 8 degrees and the sun has been setting at 3:59 p.m. So nice day to you all. Now, I'm just going to share a little presentation about some work that we've been doing for quite some time now with a fellow panelist, Harold Davis, where we've been working in Jamaica on mapping the cultural and creative industries. So we'll be calling them the CCIs, or the cultural and creative industries. But just to set sort of the context for this initiative, it's a quite a long, big initiative, and the context is that Jamaica is a world-leading creative economy, and it really does punch above its weight. It's recognized across the globe, and it brings social and economic benefits for Jamaicans at home and abroad. And although Jamaican culture is widely celebrated, nobody really knows its true value. And there is also the aspect that the sector, the creative and cultural industries, are undersupported. There's an opportunity for Jamaica if it doesn't invest in its creative economy. There's an opportunity cost to experience a loss of revenues, job creation, global exports, taxes, soft power, and the impact of brand Jamaica. Now, I understand that the screen is a little bit small, so I'm going to do a little screen swap. There we go. Hopefully this works for everybody now. Okay, great, excellent. Now, what we're looking at is one piece of a very big, large picture, or a very long, large initiative with a long tail. So we can see here multi-steps. There's sort of 5 general steps towards developing the creative economy. And what we've been doing with our partners in Herald and JBDC in Jamaica is first to map the creative economy. The second is to get an assessment of the sector's needs and its challenges and its opportunities. Third is to measure the sector's impact, and its value is very much in line with what Keith was describing. Through this, the next step is really raising the confidence in the sector, generating buy-in from the government and buy-in from the private sector and from investment of all sorts. And ultimately, this can lead to the development of a strategy to support the sector, but also very importantly, the introduction or implementation of government support or different support structures or investment of various sorts. And these sort of 5 steps have been used in country after country, creative economy after creative economy. I think the only difference is that in a lot of the larger economies and a lot of the sort of more developed economies such as the US or the UK, as Keith had pointed out, is that they have gone through these steps as well. It's taken them 20, 30 years to get there. So really these 5 steps are happening a lot quicker these days, and a lot of the learnings have been applied or have been adapted from these other markets, such as Canada and Australia and the UK, are really being deployed in places like Jamaica and Trinidad and Tobago. So we're going to just dive into the project. Now, the project is only the first 2 of those steps there, and there will be subsequent steps to this work that I believe Harold might discuss next. But in terms of these first 2 steps, you know, we started off with a project where we did a literature review. We held a number of consultations, field work in Jamaica with our partners at JBDC. And this is just before COVID hit. Of course, we had a plan to come back for quite an extended series of further fieldwork and consultations, and those had to be shifted or adapted to be done digitally and online, which worked out really well. But of course, there's nothing quite like doing things in person. We held a number of interviews. We had a huge survey go across the sector, the first time ever to really survey the entire cultural and creative industries. We held roundtables. We held capacity building and knowledge transfer workshops, webinars, and all of this culminated in a deep dive analysis, which then led to the cultural and creative industries mapping. Now, future steps, next steps would be to take this mapping and actually apply it to, to measure the sectors, to develop what is the economic impact of these sectors. And ultimately, from those economic impact evidence base, you can build a strong case for investment for the sector. In terms of capacity building, we did some capacity building around economic impact, around mapping, creative sector mapping, development for industry associations, as well as a digital market and development strategy. And all of this is really to raise the profile of the cultural and creative industries, to learn more about the creative sectors, each of the subsectors, plan for growth, engage leaders in policy for issues around the cultural and creative industries, and to support the wider political, social, and economic aims. Now, there are countless definitions of the cultural and creative industries. It's really important to take the definition or create a definition that's very specific or localized to the market in which you're working. So in this case, we looked at developing a definition for Jamaica's cultural and creative industries that really spoke and included cuisine as well, culinary and gastronomy, where it meets visual arts and design and film and television and so forth. But this is building off of other sources such as CARICOM, UNESCO, Jamaica Ministry of Culture, Gender, Entertainment and Sport, as well as the UK's Department for Digital Culture, Media and Sport, which is a leader in, has been a groundbreaker in this area. In terms of looking at the creative economy ecosystem, there are a number of different stakeholders across the board, ranging from creative practitioners, government, education, associations, freelancers, workers, and investors, and so forth. Taking a look at the sectors, we have looked and mapped across the industry. We've mapped here. This just gives sort of an overview of the types of stakeholders that have been mapped. In terms of enterprises and individuals, international partners, such as CARIFORUM and the CDB and the IDC and UNCTAD, UNESCO, and so forth. A number of the relevant policy, government ministries, and departmental agencies. And I think what's really interesting about this in the Jamaican context is you can see how huge this list is for the government departments. One of the interesting findings here is that it's a really difficult field to navigate for the sector because there are so many departments that have and touch on these various elements. Whereas in many other countries, there's a little bit more consolidation and it's a little bit easier to navigate. And then of course, the industry associations and various groups and representative bodies. We looked across the cultural and creative industries. We had a survey go out, as I mentioned, fairly good response rate, especially considering it was COVID, of just under 600. And here you can see the sort of spread of responses, lots of people working across visual arts, theater, dance, performing arts, design, music, and so forth. You can see here that a large portion of the respondents were creative practitioners themselves, as well as creative businesses. And much fewer people were actually employees or running industry associations and such. So very much practitioner and business led. Very interesting gender spread here for the survey. We have a majority of female respondents, with that being 61% of the survey. The age range is fairly mixed. It ranges across the board here, but yeah, you can see that is largely in the sort of 25 to 44 range for the survey respondents. And then again, the roles in the sector, very much on the artist and creative side, as well with a significant amount of business leaders. For each of the cultural and creative sectors or subsectors, we did a review. So there are reviews, and this report is public, everyone can read it. So there are subsector reviews for each of these subsectors, as we can see them here. And then we looked at some of the factors around the industries, maybe some of the challenges or the barriers to entry. What are the challenges or barriers for people to stay in the sector? And very interestingly, we found through the survey responses that families and the social environment were actually quite supportive of people working in culture and working in the creative industries, which isn't always the case. There's often, in different markets and communities and cultures, there's a hesitancy, for family members to work in culture and the creative industries. Here we just had a review of the educational institutions that people have been involved with, and we can see there's quite a strength of these institutions right within, within the Caribbean, but of course within Jamaica specifically. The biggest barrier to entry for training, education, and skills was affordability. But quite nice to see that there was a significant number of people who didn't see specific or impeding barriers to entry for education. In terms of enhancing the talent and pipeline, the biggest factor was increasing awareness and sector opportunities, resources, understanding what the career potential or the career paths are. Here we can see that, and this reflects largely that it's a large number of small creative practitioners responding, but we can see, and here's some evidence that in many ways, creatives are undervalued for their work. And at the same time, they are often supplementing their creative income with other sources of income. So these figures aren't the total income from creatives. These are the creative sector income, which is generally much larger when you factor in their other work. And we have a similar picture for businesses, but of course there are very large businesses, or a much smaller number of very large businesses who we can see at the top row there are above the average. In terms of opportunity for growth and revenues, market development and sales were the biggie, as well as increasing skills in business. In terms of specific barriers, skills in business and skills in marketing were the most significant. And in terms of bringing Jamaican goods to market, digital marketing and distribution was seen as the #1 opportunity. And that was followed by physical marketing and distribution. Barriers to financing. The biggest barrier through the survey was that it's very difficult to value cultural and creative products for investors and for other people, including those who might want to work in the sector, those who might want to start a business or an enterprise. So actually understanding the value, the true value and the potential, it can be realized, but as Keith had said, this needs to be mapped and monitored, and it's very difficult to bring that to the minds of people who are less familiar with investing in this sector. We went through quite an extensive SWOT analysis. We looked at strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats across the sector. We looked at the various forms of support that were prioritized by the cultural and creative industries, with entrepreneurship being the #1 area of support sought. And that was followed by networking opportunities and collaboration opportunities. This all culminated in a series of strategic recommendations. They're broken down by the short term and the medium term. So in the short term, a number of opportunities or recommendations, such as leveraging the cultural and creative industries as a tool for COVID-19 recovery. Other things like establishing a national convening body. As mentioned, there are so many governmental bodies and so many agents, associations and so forth. How can they all speak together? How can they all connect? There's a need to coordinate the industry to help create some structure so that people can work together and collaborate more and find economies of scale. Further research of the sector, and the next step, as mentioned, to measure the impact of the sector or conduct an economic impact assessment, as well as developing funding and financing, developing a cultural infrastructure plan, and developing a study of the cultural and creative industries value chain. Some of the bigger, longer term recommendations were around creating a cohesive national brand, enhancing the IP environment, building capacity, particularly in the support structures. So capacity building in associations, institutions, profile building, developing a skills strategy, developing a financial support or funding program or mechanism for the cultural sector specifically. And then really investing in local supply chains, thinking about circular economy, considering transport, logistics, importing raw goods and materials, and what that can mean for sustainable value chain working and environmental sustainability. Now, that's sort of an overview. There's a lot more detail in the report, and then a lot more detail that is being looked at and worked on outside of this as well. But I will wrap it up there, and thank you very much.
Thank you so very much, Stephen, for that very thorough presentation. It does flow quite nicely from the presentation offered by Keith. And so now I am happy to turn to Harold to hear what is this particular example or how he's going to go deeper based on what Stephen would have discussed about that very exciting project. Very happy to hear about that going on in Jamaica. Harold, you are up.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Joanne, and perhaps Keith and Stephen may have said everything that there needs to be said. So I was just thinking about singing at the end of the presentation here. But I must say that I do also admire, Joanne, the work that you have been doing. I'm a big fan, mostly because I believe that of all that we endeavor to do in the region, our greatest possibility for sustained impact is the festival economy for the region. So I really admire and I follow the work that you have done and you are doing in that area, and I appreciate that. So I had to say that I'm a fan. So let me jump right into it. Keith started exactly where I wanted to end and start. And that's about the importance of data mining and data management and managing from data. And unfortunately, creative industries, we tend not to want to focus on that at all. As a matter of fact, there are some of the creative industries, not all, but a lot of the creative industries that have a problem with persons asking for data. And you know, they'll tell you things like Babylon must know what Babylon want to know the information about. What is this about? You know what I mean? So some of those things we really have to move past because it's important. But following up on what Stephen has shared with you, this project that there are many things that we had to do to make sure that this project happened in the way in which it happened, you know, and the journey continues. One of the things that we focused on at the very beginning is to make sure that the project, this mapping exercise, was going to be an inclusive exercise, was going to be a practitioner-owned exercise. Because many times in Jamaica and perhaps in the region too, when we do work with the creative and cultural industry, we do work for the creative and cultural industries and not with the creative and cultural industries. And as a result of that, our practitioners themselves, our entrepreneurs who are in the creative and cultural industries, for whom a mapping like this is as important as it is for policymakers, etc., are divorced from the process. So one of the things that we made sure at before Stephen was engaged, we made sure that we had the buy-in from the practitioners, and one of the things that we had put in place is an advisory committee for this particular project that had a combination of policymakers on it, government representations on it, industry association representation on it, practitioners on it, on that panel. It sounds like a huge panel there, but luckily we had some crossovers, and academia as well on that panel. It's very, very important, yeah? Because like I said, a lot of times our creative industry entrepreneurs now don't take sufficient ownership in the development of the sector itself, yeah? And I say that advisedly. As you know, I'm a musician as well. I say that from an informed position as well, you know? So it's very important. So we did that. And that was a critical move. So when we were ready for the data mining, for when we were ready to launch a survey and things of that nature, we basically went to those persons on the advisory committee and asked through them that we engage their various communities to contribute to the survey. So in that regard, we found that even when the thing was published, the ownership of what was there was assumed, and that was critical for us. Last year into this year, the last 22 months now, have been perhaps the creative industries have arguably been the hardest hit set of industries right throughout the world, because the thing that caused our revenue flow, an audience and somebody to buy the product, that just immediately shut down for many of the creative industries. So in Jamaica, for instance, upwards of the Ministry of Culture did some survey, and they found that upwards of 90% of persons had their income cut by as much as 80–90% in last year. Many of our creatives were unable to pivot. Many of our creatives were unable to find a source of income to sustain them. And what we did in support of the mapping exercise as well, as Stephen mentioned it, was to immediately see how we could engage our creative industry community, our creative industry entrepreneurs, in a series of sharing sessions, in a series of webinars and knowledge sharing sessions on several topics, things like intellectual property management, technology manipulation and utilization, the whole business of internet marketing and internet business, the whole business of networking, strategic networking, and things of that nature. And we had, Stephen mentioned 4, but in fact, the series was called In Concert, JBDC In Concert. Yeah, I know, right? And we had in all about 12 of those sessions every week And of course the attendance was amazing, simply because persons were at home not doing anything. But that was one of the things that we used to make sure that we continuously engaged. But before I go, I know we're running late in overtime. I want to share with you some direct thoughts in terms of imperatives that we need to adopt as government and as practitioners. JBDC is a government-owned organization. We service close to 4,000 entrepreneurs on an annual basis, the majority of which are creative economy entrepreneurs. Government, however, generally speaking, our experience is that government needs to, first of all, understand that the CCIs are not a homogeneous group. So when we're developing policies for the CCIs, when we're developing programs, the first thing that we need to understand that is there's not a homogeneous group. Second thing that we need to understand is the range of support that is required and compartmentalize them. We need to be able to support the supply side, the artists, the creative practitioners themselves, and find programs for help in their development through School of Arts and things of that nature. We also need to stimulate the demand side as well, which we sometimes are not as good as the supply side in the region, I find, for the government is of supporting the demand side. Important for government as well, we need to know, adopt a smart government type of thing and understand how it is that creative industry entrepreneurs operate, generally speaking, and develop policies and programs that fit that mode. So smart government is very, very important. And of course, strengthening industrial association. On the CCI entrepreneur side, the very first thing that we need to understand as CCI entrepreneurs is that we are in fact in business. Now I say this, and it may seem as an obvious thing, but many times our creative industry entrepreneurs, they don't see themselves as being business persons or being entrepreneurs, and you are that. And there's a whole mindset that goes with the appreciation of that. Second thing is that data is your friend. Data is not Babylon business, or data is not something that you hug up to your chest, because data has to be your friend in terms of not only being able to run your business effectively, but also being able to provide the information such that your government and your associations and so on can provide relevant services. And the third thing that our creative entrepreneurs need to understand, the value of strategic partnerships and collaborations, speaking with one voice and supporting their own industry association. There are many opportunities for the growth for the CCIs as I wrap. One of the things is to dig deeper, as Stephen says, in terms of the data mining. And I'm happy to announce that we are now going to embark on the second phase of the development of the mapping exercise, which, apart from diving deeper and dealing with economic impact assessment for specific industries under the CCIs, we want to look at the festival economy where that is concerned. But apart from that, importantly, we are developing a statistical framework that will be implemented by our Statistical Institute of Jamaica to capture the information from the cultural and creative industries and to report it in the same way that we do for manufacturing sector, tourism sector, and so on. So we're developing a framework, modeling off of a UNESCO framework that will be able to do that. But as important as that is, because that is non-existent in Jamaica, and I gather in other territories in the region as well. But important in order to have that happen is to open the data mining channels. That is critical. And that is something that we'll be working closely on in terms of this new phase here, to see how it is that we can open the data mining channels through our industry associations, for instance, through, as Keith says, metadata strategies, for instance, how it is, because without opening that data mining conduit, so that data flows not to get a snapshot like the marketing, like the mapping exercise has done, but to get a continuous flow so that on an annual basis, we know exactly what percentage of the GDP is being contributed by the sector and if it is growing. That's important because government, when they're investing in the sector, it needs to be just that, an investment. So an investment is something that you do when you can predict the returns based on the data management and the data knowledge that you have. We're not able to do that now. So we're doing it in a piecemeal kind of way. The future for the CCIs, as I wrap, is bright. One of the things that we have not exploited in the region is intra-regional collaboration in terms of our CCIs, and we need to exploit that, because brand Trinidad is strong, brand Barbados is strong, brand Jamaica is strong, but brand Caribbean is arguably can be even stronger if we strategically collaborate in certain respects. And I believe I'm going to leave it there and open for discussion if we have time for that. Joanne, you gone?
The data seems to be a bit unstable. Is everybody hearing me now?
Hearing it just now.
Okay.
I have a bit of lag. Do let me know when you're hearing me clearly again.
Okay, in the meantime, thank you, Mr. Davis. Until Dr. Tull rejoins us, I would like to invite members of our participants to ask questions based on today's presentation on the value of cultural industries and the issues related to measuring that value. I think the presentations emphasized so much about the importance of being able to measure before you can manage. Dr. Till is back with us?
Yes, I believe so. Is everyone hearing me clearly again?
Yes, we are.
Great. My apologies for that. We seem to have a bit of glitch there. Thank you so much for that introduction. And I'm leading into the question segment. And once again, thank you to our panelists. I am quite intrigued. We got a lot of information there. I must confess to our audience, I just kind of went with the spirit as to who I decided would speak first. And I must say that the discussion flowed quite nicely in terms of choosing Keith first, moving on to Stephen, and then Harold was able to drill down for us to talk about that Caribbean context that is really very important. And I want to emphasize and endorse that simply because we can most certainly seek to come up with solutions and recommendations, but we really have to always be cognizant of that Caribbean context, that we are sure that we are arriving at indigenous methodologies and implementation tactics that can work for us. And so before I get back to that, because I'm gonna put you guys on the spot, I do want to ask though, apart from the Jamaica experience that we were just able to learn about, based on your discussion and what you submitted today, can you think of any best practices from across the region in your own particular realms of expertise? And I could start certainly with Keith and give Harold a little bit of time to rest his voice. I'll go back to Stephen after Keith, and then I'll come back to you, Harold. Any best practice?
Are you asking if I think there's currently best practices or best practices? Yeah. I think in terms of structure, we've got the PROs in place. I'm talking from the music side. You know, we've got JCAP, yes. we've got those in place. You know, they're working, people are getting the royalties. Trinidad has just now implemented the TTIRC through the IFPI. I don't know if Jamaica has done that yet, but if they haven't, they should really get on board with that. And there are other, you know, Trinidad has Music TT as well, that's doing a lot of work for artists and really trying to support them. So in terms of that, there is some structure, but I feel we're still not on the digital grid. and we need to get digital with everything, because as Harold, and I put in the I put in the chat there, Harold for Prime Minister, because literally everything he said is so spot on. Like there's not like everything he said is spot on for the Caribbean, and so things are happening. You know, things are happening and things are moving, but we need to push even further and get on, especially on the digital side of things. So that's my thing.
You know,
so I'm going to put you on the spot just to mention. So I heard you mention, yes, I heard Keith mention Trinidad and Tobago, Jamaica, but we have an OECS. So is there anything in particular that you would have discussed today that the OECS, where do they begin then? Because you talk that and Tobago, you mentioned Barbados, that OECS contact, so they connect that, they can get to what you're talking about in terms of recognizing the importance of data and having those.
Yeah, I'm having trouble hearing you.
Is there a lag again?
Yeah, there's a bit of a problem, but I kind of made out your question. I think it really needs to start with digital infrastructure. Digital infrastructure. Everything in our globe right now is all digital. And I think if we can build out digital infrastructure or plug into existing infrastructure, we're halfway there, because we can immediately start to track, trace, and get information about what our sector is doing, how our sector is performing, and use that data to now make informed business decisions.
Right. So I'm going to come by Stephen. No, you haven't said that, because we say this and we hear now, and I believe Keith had it on his slide, but I'm throwing it by Stephen. The whole ideas around digital monetization. It's like a very gray, murky area for us in the Caribbean. And I would well imagine, if we were to follow on from what Keith is recognizing, that this has one of the key ways in which we would capitalize on what Keith is speaking about, or most certainly getting into data mining infrastructure, that it could lead to that. What do you think are our key challenges in the region? What is lagging us where digital monetization is concerned? Why do we get afraid when we hear Bitcoin and NFTs and what have you?
Digital is, I think, a challenge everywhere. It's just perhaps maybe a challenge. It's perhaps being around a little bit more. It's been explored more deeply in some markets more than others. I think it's really important, as Keith said, that the mapping of the digital side is very important. We often forget that. We often do focus on the physical mapping in terms of cultural mapping. Digital, big opportunities, as Harold was saying, about the supply and the demand. Well, there is the potential for infinite supply of culture. Digital really helps extend what how that culture can be consumed, how it can be accessed, where it can be accessed, and when it can be accessed. Some of the big factors around consumption are time and place, and so digital really helps expand that. As well, it helps with the supply chains. If you're thinking about elements of the cultural and creative industries that are reliant upon natural physical resources, importing resources that then need to go through a process that then perhaps need to be exported. There are tariffs, there are barriers to importing goods and materials. In a digital aspect, in a digital world, a lot of these barriers don't exist. There are, of course, other barriers. There are barriers to access around digital literacy. There are barriers to access around equipment, software, and so forth. But there are equally as many opportunities, and a lot of these opportunities are very, very underdeveloped.
Okay, I think we've lost Dr. Till again, or she is back again. Dr. Till, would you like to continue before we close the session?
Yes, most certainly. Thank you very much for that. I heard most of what you said is just towards the end. It allows me to give Harold, because we can all of this when there are certain realities in front of, because we're talking about creative to get sound internet access, that we could do this. So what are some of the real challenges that we have to confront, and at the same time, what are those solutions that can simultaneously go along with what some of your colleagues have been saying there?
Yeah, great. A great question, but I want to enlarge that discussion about digital utilization, and put it in the realm of us inculcating and infusing an innovation culture in terms of how we operate in the CCI ecosystem, including our entrepreneurs. Last year, when we did a number of sessions, as I mentioned to you before, one of the things we focused on was digital transformation and how it is that you digitize your business and go online. And even then, a lot of our CCI entrepreneurs had issues with how it is that you monetize that. It's one thing to go online and using digital tools, but it's another completely to monetize. It has to do with a literacy level. But what I'm suggesting, it has to do with more than that. It has to do with how you see your business and how you see your entrepreneurship venture as a creative, The whole business of, for instance, leveraging intellectual property in the way so that it becomes an asset of your business, for instance, is something that we have to morph to, is something that we have to become, it has to become second nature to us. The whole business of how we manage, how we collect, and how we utilize data in transforming whatever business solution that we're providing as a creative is something that we have to be constantly looking at as well. If we really think about what it is that we do as an entrepreneur and pivoting our mind to the reality of how we have to now change that product or adopt that product as a creative to get to our market who has changed and now involved in convenience economy and one the thing where them are, how them are, and how and what it when they want it as well. We are in convenience economy. How it is that as a creative entrepreneur we move that. Connectivity has gotten better in the region. Certainly in Jamaica, there's a huge drive to get connectivity to a place where it's accessible to everyone. And I know this drive is in the region as well. Connectivity is one thing, Joan. The real thing is to think of your business as a transforming business, and of your art, of your product, of your solution that you're providing, as a solution being provided in a space that has evolved, where things have changed. The music industry completely changed. The music industry has completely changed. How it is that consume their product has changed. So that mindset change is what is needed for our entrepreneurs, CCI entrepreneurs in the region, I believe, and we'll be on our way, because guess what? We have the raw material. We're not short of the raw material. You mentioned last point. You mentioned earlier, Joanne, the whole business of what it is that we see in the region that is good. We have the most vibrant cultural heritage in the region, and that has manifested by the crop overs, by the carnivals, by the sumfests, so on, and all of those products that we have brought. What we need to do is maximize those monetizations such that they can pay for themselves and earn us the wealth that we deserve in the region.
Thank you so very much for that, Harold. It's amazing that we ended up in my garden talking about the festival economy. We could stay here all afternoon.
Yeah, well.
But of course, all good things must come to an end. And I just want to do a quick close or summary to say that I think the lessons that we've gained here is that simultaneous action and effort is required. Most certainly we heard how we can pivot, and I do like that word that was casted out very early on in the discussion, into that digital environment, and we were given some very practical, very easy intervention strategies. I mean, Keith and Stephen were able to show us things that are actually going on, but certainly most importantly is how we can now channel these into the CCI development context for the region and have it now go beyond where it's at now to really take its place as a sustainable aspect of the regional economy. And last but not least, most certainly in terms of Harold's intervention, to really locate for us what we are of, what we can do, and what we already have that we can use to certainly be able to pivot on the suggestions and recommendations that were given by Stephen and Keith. And so I think that we had a very good discussion. It reminds me of something that I'm writing on right now. Resilience is a verb, because all I kept hearing right through were action words and action steps. So I do believe that we are in good hands and that the CCIs of the region will push forward in spite of the pandemic. There seems to be opportunity for us. So I want to thank my panelists, Stephen Hignell, Harold Davis, and Keith Kerr, for giving us that discussion today. Thank you. This closes off session 3 of COTE 2021. I am Dr. Joanne Tull. Good afternoon, everyone.
Thank you, Dr. Tull and panelists. We had a very interesting discourse of how non-traditional innovating sectors, such as our cultural industries of the economy, can contribute to not only diversification, but to also build resilience. You know, Dr. Tull used that term as well, resilience, and differentiation of our Caribbean product. So I think it developed that appreciation of our Caribbean identity as a sustainable economic good, not only contributing to our social capital, but also contributing to our economic needs, especially when we look at how digitization can mobilize this process. And session 4 appropriately marries well with this discussion, as we may see a lot of alignment in the issues raised, such as how do we map and measure value? What measures of the values can tell us? And how do we make appropriate decisions to manage and maximize the benefit from resources and goods that have traditionally been treated as non-economic? To chair session 4 on the blue economy, I have the pleasure of introducing Professor John Agard. Professor John Agard, PhD, is Executive Director of the University of the West Indies Global Institute for Climate Smart and Resilient Development. He has also been appointed by the United Nations Secretary General as co-chair of the United Nations Global Sustainability Development Report, to be drafted by 15 independent scientists and published by the United Nations in 2023. His research interest is in the field of sustainability science, especially as it relates to mainstreaming environmental considerations such as biodiversity and ecosystem services conservation, along with climate change mitigation and adaptation, and blue and circular economy development into the core of policy and decision-making. Internationally, he has previously served as an independent advisor on environmental and sustainability policy to the board of the Inter-American Development Bank in Washington, D.C. He has also been on the scientific advisory panel of UNEP for the Global Environmental Outlook, and was previously a coordinating lead author for the Scenarios chapter in GEO4. He has also been a coordinating lead author of the Intergovernmental Science Policy Panel on Biodiversity and Ecosystem Services, First Global Assessment Chapter 5, Pathways to a Sustainable Future. He is currently the review author for Small Islands in the current 6th assessment of the Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change and has previously served as a lead author in IPCC's previous 4th and 5th assessments. With that introduction, I would like to ask Professor John Agard to please join us as chair of session 4. Professor Agard.
Thank you very much for the excessively long introduction. I'm going to just introduce the other speakers and read their bio, and we're going to try and stick to the time. The previous session went a bit somewhat over time. So let me just start with a quick remark. When I had met Prime Minister of Barbados, Mia Mottley, in Washington, face-to-face, she said that Barbados was not a small island developing state. It was a big ocean state. They had more than 400 times more water than land, and they were going to exploit the water in a sustainable way. And that's a good introduction to what we want to talk about now. So with that quick remark, let me just introduce the three speakers. The first will be Professor Judith Gobin, who is a marine biologist with environmental and ecological experiences in the marine and coastal areas of Trinidad and Tobago. She holds a PhD in the field of marine biodiversity from the University of Exeter and Plymouth Marine Laboratory in the UK, and has an MPhil in the field of marine biology and pollution ecology from the University of the West Indies at the St. Augustine campus. And Professor Gobin has also lectured on oceanography and marine biology and coastal ecosystems management in the Department of Life Sciences. She is the head of the Department of Life Sciences at the St. Augustine campus. She previously worked for 16 years in the Environmental Quality Group at the Institute of Marine Affairs in Trinidad and Tobago. And she also works as an environmental consultant throughout the Caribbean in the field of marine and environmental science and environmental law. And she continues to work on a number of environmental projects with local, regional, and international agencies, and is also in a few other Caribbean territories like St. Lucia and Belize and so forth. She has published in the scientific areas in international scholarly refereed journals. Her topic is going to be, she will speak on the Caribbean and its economy plunging into the blue economy. In line with what the Prime Minister, Mia Mottley, said, we have more water than land, okay? And we need to exploit it in a sustainable way. The next speaker will be Dr. Ruel Ellis. Dr. Ellis has a BSc in engineering from UWI, an MSc from Brunel University, a PhD from UWI. He is a lecturer in the Department of Mechanical and Manufacturing Engineering at the University of the West Indies, St. Augustine, in the following courses: simulation, project management. He also production operations and management, database design, and enterprise information systems. So he's a very technical person. He's the coordinator of the MSc Project Management Program and also delivers the project management information systems and project management for small and medium enterprises courses. He additionally supervises projects in the MSc in Occupational Environmental Safety and Health in the Faculty of Science and Technology. Dr. Ellis is also the current chairman of the Institute of Electronic and Electronic Engineers in Trinidad and Tobago, the Education Society, and is current chairman of the Society of Caribbean Industrial Engineers and president of the West Indian Group of University Teachers, the St. Augustine branch. And publicly, Dr. Ellis serves as chair of the Operations Committee on the National Institute for Higher Education, Research, Science and Technology Board of Governors. He's a member of the National Productivity Council and the Advisory Committee for Creative Industries as well. So he has a lot of practical experience, and I hope you will bring that to the floor. Dr. Ellis will speak on mapping of the blue economy in the CARICOM sub-region innovations and business potential. And the final speaker will be Dr. Nikisha Spencer. Nikisha Spencer holds a PhD from Binghamton University, State University of New York in the USA. Her area of research is in environmental and resource economics, climate economics, applied economics, and labor economics. She has many publications in all of these areas. Dr. Spencer will speak on climate change and beach tourism in the Caribbean as well. So with that introduction, I'm going to hand over now to the first speaker, Professor Gobin. Professor Gobin, over to you.
Thank you very much, Prof. Agard, and thank you all sincerely for this opportunity. I just have a couple of slides, which I'm just gonna, so I'm guessing that you can see that first one. Prof. Agard, are we seeing that first slide?
Yes, we are.
Yeah, okay, good, thanks. So in line with the conference theme of retooling, restructuring of Caribbean economies and in the readiness, I'm going to talk a little bit about the readiness of the Caribbean to plunge, as it were, into the blue economy. A gentle reminder though of what the blue economy is. According to the World Bank, the blue economy is the sustainable use of ocean resources for economic growth, improve livelihoods and jobs while preserving the health of ocean ecosystems. This is a very tall order, as we can appreciate. It's this whole balancing act that we need to be ready for. For SIDS and the Caribbean, that's small island developing states, and especially us in the Caribbean, the blue economy is not, however, a global advertisement that our ocean is open for business. In fact, the World Bank's definition clearly identifies the fact, it highlights it, that better stewardship of our ocean or blue resources must be highly encouraged. Just gonna go to this next slide. This slide just really reminds us about what the blue economy is. We in the Caribbean, however, have been engaging in the blue economy. It is not a new concept to us. We have been engaging economically, socially in these activities such as fisheries, tourism, recreation, oil and gas extraction, marine transport, etc. More recently, though, we have been moving towards sustainable energy, renewable production, and of course, we have been in the scientific arena, increasing our research in marine biotechnology and including bioprospecting, which is where, of course, the sort of last of our resources and understanding of the ocean lies. The World Bank estimated the Caribbean blue economy at a value of approximately $407 billion in 2012. So the whole idea of this blue economy, which we are sitting on, really needs to be sustained. And this balancing activity that I mentioned earlier, how can we do that in our space? As Prof. Agard mentioned, our islands, we really are ocean states. We have a vast amount of ocean, of water. We have a vast amount of resources at our disposal relative to much smaller land spaces. But at the same time, we have the most to lose from the degradation of these marine resources. Importantly, though, the blue economy concept, as you can see on the slide, includes the various aspects of waste management, that is land-based pollution and maritime pollution, climate change, ocean currents, acidification, and rising sea level, climate change aspects rather. In other words, while we are encouraged to continue to develop the blue economy and enjoy the profits and the benefits as represented in the slide, we need to be very mindful of achieving this balance, that sustainable goal, Are we able to leave the ocean in a state maybe even better than we found it for future generations? Well, in terms of waste management, we do not appear to be doing such a great job. We have seen the reports in the newspapers, we have seen, heard the stories, we've read the publications on plastics, for example, and the extreme wastes, solids, liquid, and gaseous waste that continue in and around our Caribbean seas and Caribbean territories. So what are some of the needs that we require for improving on this? How can we benefit, how can we improve on this? We need policies, practices, new businesses, technologies, what we consider to be blue innovation technologies. And this is why this retooling, restructuring is critical to turn the ocean tide, as it were, or the tide on ecosystem health, while at the same time reducing poverty and ensuring food security. In this respect, I can say happily it has started in many Caribbean territories. We are preparing. While many of the territories still do not have specific strategy documents, many explicitly reference the blue economy as a policy priority, and within various levels of support from global institutions such as the World Bank, IDB, UNDP, etc. For example, our neighbor Grenada in 2014 became the first country in the Organization of Eastern Caribbean States to develop a detailed version for blue growth as the country's future. Antigua and Barbuda have got now a Ministry of Social Transformation and the Blue Economy, as well as Antigua and Barbuda. That's where our Center of Excellence for Oceanography and the Blue Economy, a University of the West Indies center, will be located. At the same time, Barbados has a Ministry for Maritime Affairs and the Blue Economy, while Dominica has a Ministry of Blue and Green Economy. Many other island states and territories have got blue economy and ocean matters generally under the portfolio of a specific ministry, such as planning, for example, as is in Trinidad and Tobago, agriculture and fisheries, as in St. Kitts and St. Lucia. Admittedly, some states like Trinidad and Tobago rather, Barbados and Suriname will continue to face a bit of a dilemma. This slide shows us clearly what I thought was a very interesting headline yesterday, November the 24th, where our minister says, "Don't panic, hydrocarbons are here to stay." And then just on the side, it says, CARICOM talks sustainable energy and moves away from fossil fuel. And I know that most of us would have seen the slide, the picture on the left, which came straight off of Sir David Attenborough's talk at COP26. Is there a future for the oil and gas sector? Which is, in fact, as we very well know, one of the key polluting, contaminating activities and contaminating activities rather within the Caribbean's blue economy. We know only too well the overall negative impacts of these explorations, and we well know, and we are looking forward to the shift away to renewable sources of energy. This was, as I mentioned, key to the conversations at COP26. However, as you know, we are in this dilemma, some of the territories, and we will continue to be in this dilemma. My colleague, Dr. Marlene Atz, only recently, in reference to the conversations at COP26, has clearly suggested that, and I quote, Trinidad and Tobago must now look towards the energy sector itself to finance us out of the energy sector. I really find this quite interesting, and of course, it hits the nail on the head. We must then move into a more diversified portfolio. Perhaps these conflicting headlines will then not appear side by
2
side.
minutes remaining.
In the near future, we can only hope. Thank you, Prof. So back to the Blue Economy Program. Ideally, we want to safeguard natural wonders of our islands. We want to set up marine protected areas and vulnerable marine ecosystems when we get into deeper waters. But it's not really easy to achieve. How can we do that? We can begin to provide education and awareness, encourage scientific research, and of course, we're already engaging in that. We are at the moment at the University of the West Indies, we've gone into developing biotechnology expertise. Some of our treasures and resources in the deep sea environment, for example, are marine genetic resources. That is, we can use the science to provide us with the information on these new resources that may be available to us. So basic education about the ocean's role in the future prosperity will raise awareness and create that political will that is needed for change. We need to continue to implement and enact policies. We also need to really adopt the tool of marine spatial planning, where it generates categories and designates areas for particular uses, in some cases translating into ocean zoning. This, of course, is problematic, where we may have to undo some of what we had before. As I mentioned, we have been engaged in the blue economy from forever. So how do we relocate structures and so on that have been in place for eons? How do we get this new transition towards balancing the uses of, and in a limited space, some of these activities which in themselves are very conflicting? It takes a lot of work, and I'm going to then close off by saying
10 minutes up.
Okay, thank you. In conclusion, we need to adopt some new technologies. Adaptation is more successful when aligned to mitigation and poverty eradication policies. Thank you very much.
Okay, thank you so much for meeting the time. And we'll pass on now to the next speaker, who will be Dr. Ruel Ellis, who is going to talk about mapping of the blue economy in the CARICOM sub-region, innovations and business potential. Over to you, Ruel.
All right, my apologies. Hello, good afternoon. Thank you very much, Professor. And I must thank Professor Gobin for, what should I say, taking care of the definitions and taking care of a lot of stuff, which I can just skip through as I go. So in terms of looking at the blue economy, this project was started by WIPO in order to map and identify who are the players in the blue economy within the CARICOM region. So as part of it, just look at some definitions, some methodology, some of the findings. And since we look at entrepreneurs, that's where the empathy map, and that I used a lot of design thinking tools in order to complete this mapping. And Dr. Gobin referred to the SDG, the United Nations SDG target 14.7, in terms of what is needed for the sustainable development of the blue economy. However, beyond that, we do have the Organization of Economic and Cooperation Development estimating that by the year 2030, SIDS and developing nations should be able to extract at least $24 trillion from the ocean economy. Now, the definition which I used is a bit different from Professor Gobin's, in that it was one which was proposed by Compete Caribbean earlier this year. And it states that it's an economic activity that directly or indirectly uses ocean or river resources as input, and that contributes and does not negatively affect the health and sustainability of the ocean and the river ecosystem. It emphasizes conservation and sustainable management based on the idea that health oceans ecosystems are more productive and fundamental to sustainable ocean-based economies. Sustainable management implies that the economic activity in balance with the long-term capacity of the ocean ecosystems to support such activities. And I chose this definition in that it gave us a wider perspective on the potential of the blue economy, and it incorporated the green economy, the people who are on land who are polluting the oceans. So in the methodology, it's quick. Just look at the participants, identifying them, did some data collection online because of COVID, couldn't get out there, and then look at the analysis from descriptive statistics, looked at some ranking, and I actually used some business mapping tools in order to look at the various businesses and look at which ones are closer to the top. And the reason for that is that WIPO wanted to be able to identify which businesses had the potential to be trained to move to a different level to start actually being profitable in the blue economy. So this slide, just looking at how do you build sustainability? And a couple of the things which we'll look at in terms of supporting developing countries and managing ocean development in a sustainable way, which was some of the work coming out of the G20 Development Working Group. And this report has a lot of things and shows a lot of the weaknesses in our environment, such as the fact that there are tours, ships which pass through the region, collect data, and leave the region without sharing the data with us. So there are people in different countries with a greater knowledge of our information on our surrounding waters than we do of ourselves. When the data was collected, this is just a summary of some of it. In terms of the type of projects, some non-governmental to government projects were the least. In terms of where the projects are, as identified before, Barbados seems to be moving ahead. And the fact is they do have the present Blue Economy Center at Cave Hill. Moving on, in terms of what type of projects exist, ecosystem sustainability seems to be the biggest, and a lot of it is about training. A lot of the NGOs, that's what they do, to train people about ecosystem sustainability. But there are a lot of other areas, as Dr. Gobin already identified, in which we have blue economy participation. Now, using the empathy map to try to find out what are some of the ills that people are feeling. So people have technological concerns in terms of what they're seeing. They're seeing limited experimentation and that there is no real research and development taking place. At least they're not seeing it in the blue economy. In terms of from an emotional perspective, Dr. Gobin mentioned policy. So they identified that policy and governance is limited. And in terms of what could be gained by the development of the blue economy is that proper governance of the blue economy for all, so that all participants could benefit from it. And one of the things that came out of that was the fact that in some of the territories, there are conflicts between hoteliers, fishermen, and recreational divers for space in the ocean. And somebody has to take control, as Dr. Gobin said, and be able to identify what spaces would be reserved for what. What is being said and done. And one of the only highlight on this is some people are advocating for equitable distribution of the coastal spaces, as I just mentioned. Some of the pains, I will skip this, given that running late, but because I want to get to what Dr. Gobin spoke about in terms of a home for the blue economy. Because what has happened since then is the WIPO has started a couple workshops. We have done 2 so far. Another one is carded for next week, I believe, or week after. And at the end, we are trying to develop some interventions for all operators or participants at all levels in the blue economy. So the aim is to, some of the recommendations coming out of it is to implement the capacity building interventions in the areas of state-of-the-art methodologies such as lean commercialization, implement a monitoring program for entrepreneurs, mentoring program for entrepreneurs, and to establish a collaborative hub between the TLIs, tertiary level institutions, where the tools, equipment, and staff can be pooled and trained to undertake project work, or to develop contracts in a collaborative and commercial entities. With 3 more minutes to go, I can skip through this set of, when I looked at some of the existing projects which are taking place, some of the existing operators, this is an example of something that we could implement more or less immediately. There are people doing geospatial work. The Jambin is a project out of Jamaica. The ROPAX is, I can't remember exactly where it's from, maybe St. Lucia, one of the other islands. Then we have the guy from St. Lucia who is creating fertilizer from Sargassum. And then we could put all of that in terms of the agriculture. So that is one thing which could be done. The other which could be done is literally collecting the data, creating the databases, doing the analytics, finding ideas, developing projects, and using these projects in order to make money. Now, a home for the Blue Economy, a Blue Economy Center, that collaborative hub. And what I did, I looked at all the major TLIs in the region and looked at what they offered and compared it to what are the different knowledge needs for the Blue Economy. And the UWI seems to be the most or the best suited place in that it's the only institution that has all the knowledge areas necessary to develop a proper Blue Economy Center, right? So it's gonna look at a link of engineering, agriculture, the humanities, social sciences, medical sciences. And in the end, this is what we're trying to achieve. At the base, a repository in terms of BSUs, project ideas, some project management training. Above that, look at the research and development in terms of technology and commercialization, sustainable development. Then above that, we look at education in terms of entrepreneurship and professional development and social awareness. And then we look at the policies because it's difficult to get the guys at the top to agree on anything unless the people at the bottom start calling for it. That, ladies and gentlemen, is my 10 minutes. I have 1 minute and 33 seconds. It's back to you, Professor Agard.
Well, you've ended ahead of time.
Yes, I have
You get an A grade.
Thank you.
An A grade. Met the timeline. Okay, so so we can quickly hand on to the next speaker, Dr. Nikisha Spencer, who's going to talk on climate change and beach tourism in the Caribbean. And I know that when questions are asked, she might ask for Eric Strobel to intervene. He's online as well, so want to recognize him. So over to you.
All right, good afternoon. Yes, my sound is on. So my topic is climate change and beach tourism in the Caribbean, and Professor Strobel is also here, who will be assisting, as Professor Agard said. Now, as you guys can easily appreciate, sandy beaches are an important feature of the Caribbean islands. They provide recreational opportunities, they protect coastal investments from storm waves, they provide a home for plants and animal species, and of course, they are a part of the sea sand product that Caribbean islands in general advertise to bring in revenue for the tourism sector. However, the value of sandy beaches to the Caribbean is threatened by climate change. Here we have a pictorial illustration where you have sea level rise, so you can see a sinking world. And on the right, you see beaches disappearing, right? So the problem is that sea level rise can actually permanently shut down the tourism sector in the long run. And if we have no beaches, then, I mean, what we offer to tourists would actually be limited, right? So we have a problem there. Now, globally, this is a global thing. Sea level rise is actually, increasing. And as some studies have pointed out, this could significantly reduce the number of sandy beaches and cause the disappearance of more than half, by the end of the year 2100, right? Now, as it relates to the Caribbean, some studies have been done. And so we can expect sea level rise to get rid of our beaches, right? Some countries, as Paniki and Finkel pointed out, would result in, will have 100% beach loss, right? And of course, this could be as much as 14%. But despite what has been done before, there are several things that we need to understand for the Caribbean, sandy beach loss under different climate change scenarios, because we do have different scenarios that we need to take into account. And we need to understand what can be lost in terms of tourist accommodation that are located near sandy beaches, right? And of course, governments, policymakers, they are interested in how much money we're going to lose. Now here we have the distribution of sandy beach length across the different Caribbean islands. And as you can see, there's an uneven distribution. Bahamas would have the most sandy beaches, followed by Cuba, Haiti, DR, and Turks and Caicos. Now together, these islands at the top would occupy more than about 86% of the Caribbean's resources, right? Well, other countries, as you can see, they have a measure of sandy beaches as well. Now, to look at sandy beach per hotel room is also important. And, Montserrat is there at the top, and we have Guadeloupe, St. Barthélemy, and of course we have at the bottom, we have Cuba and St. Lucia, who would actually be, have less than those that are at the top and even in the middle. So this is just giving an idea of what exists currently. But what do we really want to learn? Well, we want to know how much we would lose, as I mentioned before, in terms of sandy beaches. And of course, there are two general scenarios that, studies like these would generally conduct analysis under. There's the RCP 8.5 and the RCP 4.5. So the RCP 4.5 is actually the, lower emissions pathway, but given our current behavior, we are actually on the RCP 8.5. So that is why I'm presenting this. But of course, our study would definitely have the low emissions pathway, which is what would obtain if we were to adjust our activities. So as you can see there, we can expect by the year 2050, we can expect Bahamas, Cuba. So again, we see an uneven distribution, right? But the biggest losers in terms of sandy beach loss would be the Bahamas. We can see Cuba standing out, the British Virgin Islands. If we look at the bottom, we'll see US Virgin Islands moving a little bit upward. You can see St. Lucia, right? So, that just gives you an illustration of what will take place by 2050 under this specific scenario for the Caribbean islands. Then by the year 2100, things will look much worse, right? The biggest loser in terms of sandy beach loss would be St. Barthélemy. Then we have Bahamas, of course, and we have Cuba. We have Jamaica looking up, and we have US Virgin Islands and Trinidad and Tobago. And that is actually in line with St. Vincent and the Grenadines, right? So this is what the Caribbean will look like by 2100 if we remain on the current pathway that we are on, right? So, and of course, as I mentioned before, we want to translate these into hotel beach room losses. And for 2050, this is what the situation looks like. We have BVI in the race for losing. And we have Trinidad and Tobago, we have Antigua and Barbuda, right? But we have a lot of islands on the lower end, but that doesn't mean that they should relax, because remember that Caribbean islands, of course, depend on tourism, right? So again, if you have no sandy beaches, your hotel rooms are going away, then this, of course, is going to affect your tourism industry. By 2100, as expected, we expect things to look much, much worse. We have Montserrat and Antigua and Barbuda. So Antigua and Barbuda at the extreme top, close, somewhere a little bit below the middle, we have Montserrat. So these will experience like 100% beach room losses. And we have US Virgin Islands right behind them. And other countries that should be worried, of course, would include like Grenada, Jamaica, St. Lucia, St. Barthélemy. Well, it doesn't mean that the other countries should not be on the lookout or should try to adjust, right? Because again, they all depend on tourism, or most of them depend on tourism. So, you have to protect what you have, or you have to plan for what may happen, right? Now, of course, this is what, industry players would be interested in, policymakers. Now, I'm just picking a sample of countries. So of course, we would have monetized the losses for all the countries in the Caribbean, right, in terms of what they will lose in terms of tourism revenue. So of course, for the Caribbean in general, the expected loss will be 19.2%, and that range 4.1 and 52.5% is just what, could happen. Any one of them or any values between that range could actually take place. And by the year 2100, again, we're going to be losing more, right? Approximately 47%. So if we look at the individual islands, we see that Antigua and Barbuda, British Virgin Islands, for 2050, that is Trinidad and Tobago, they're going to be losing a lot. By 2100, again, we expect things to look much worse, unfortunately. So we have Antigua and Barbuda, Montserrat, being totally wiped out. And other countries that should be worrying a lot would be like British Virgin Islands, Grenada, Jamaica, US Virgin Islands. But as I mentioned before, or I kept emphasizing, everybody still needs to worry, but these are the countries that would actually be suffering the most in terms of monetary losses. So what can we do? Well, of course, we can't totally eliminate the problem, but we can do something to control it. So a common practice that has been used to recreate beaches is beach nourishment, right? And that is where you try to reverse erosion. It's relatively low cost in terms of construction and maintenance. The Caribbean is not so big on it. There's evidence that few beach nourishment projects are taking place, but the government has nothing to do with them, really. But in the US, you actually have more of those projects taking place. And of course, if the government were to get involved, then you have tax earnings and it will actually boost the economies, right? But general issues with beach nourishment strategy is sand availability and of course the cost of acquiring it. And when hurricanes come, they would actually wash away the sand. But nevertheless, if you look at these costs compared to what I showed you before in terms of tourism loss, in terms of revenue, you can see that beach nourishment will be much, much cheaper, right? So if you compare these percentages, you would recall that the percentages I showed you before are like much, much larger, right? So obviously you can see that beach nourishment is actually cheaper, right? And should actually be done if you want to protect some of your revenue, right?
Two minutes remaining.
Okay, yeah, sure, I'll finish. So other strategies would be like beach drainage, and these have this strategy actually had successes in Australia and Japan. You had hard defenses. Of course, hotels can actually build further inland, but there are going to be issues with that because you're going to have other competition for the usage of land. And of course, one can actually engage in non-beach tourism, such as ecotourism. But again, this can actually be impacted by climate change. So what did we learn? Well, with climate change, we can expect the Caribbean to have coastal erosion, lots of sandy beaches, lots of beach hotel rooms, and of course, the most significant thing, loss of tourism revenue. As I mentioned before, beach nourishment can be done. It's relatively low cost in terms of what the Caribbean countries can expect to lose. And of course, you can actually combine it with other measures to, counteract the negative effects or the problems that one can actually have with beach nourishment. And that's it. I am on time.
Okay, so thanks so much for finishing ahead of time. And we'll be open up for questions to the panelists. And now a lot of useful ideas were suggested. So if people can put them in the chat. Okay, any questions that anybody wants to bring up, or whether they prefer to maybe unmute and speak directly and ask the questions, because that might be easier. Are any of those online able to actually speak or raise their hand and speak? Is that possible?
No, I'm gathering they can't, Prof. Agard. I'm seeing that in the chat. They can't raise their hand to speak, so they'll have to type the questions.
Okay, well, we receiving in the chat some questions coming up. I think I've seen a question it says to Nikisha from Suni Lala. To Nikisha, monetary losses from Trinidad and Tobago was 66.8% by 2050, but only 71% by 2100. Other countries saw a major jump from 2050 to 2100. Can you say why only the slight jump for Trinidad and Tobago?
Well, these estimates, remember that each country actually has a range, so there's a bit of uncertainty when it comes to that. So that is just a projection. It doesn't have to be the case. It could actually be much larger, right? So it's just
Yes, I saw you had some bars that, from low to high. So it's not, so those are just estimates.
Yes,
yeah.
Right. And there's actually a range. I mean, given the time, of course, I couldn't show all of that, right? So there is some uncertainty when it comes to these estimates, right? So it could actually be higher and it could actually be lower.
Okay. Seeing another question came up to Professor Gobin. Do you think Trinidad is ready to get involved in the blue economy mindset?
Thanks for the question, Pradeep. Yes, I do think so. As I mentioned, and we know we heard even, the Prime Minister's speech as well at COP26. There is the interest, there is the sort of within policies, there is that mention in the overall overarching sort of ideas about conservation and the use of our blue economy and its resources. So I'm saying yes. At the same time, the slide that I put up really, of course, it begs the question, how will we balance it? And you would have recognized that I started off by saying that it is going to be difficult. It is, how do we go? It's almost like in retrospect, how do we change things? But I do think with the positives that are going on, and Prof. Agard could allude to some of it in terms of renewable energy and so on, we are definitely moving in that direction. So I think there is hope. And I think we have a lot of people interested in moving and really moving away from hydrocarbons to a large extent, but more than that, really just developing those new innovations within the blue economy sector. Thank you.
Can I just comment on this, because there's an important perspective that was brought up. I heard from the energy companies in Trinidad and Tobago, I'm not going to call their names, okay? They're saying that it's not oil and gas they produce. It's energy that they produce, and they see the direction the world is going into. And so they have made commitments to produce energy, which they'll still sell to you, from renewable energy. Okay, that's the direction. They've put a timeline by which they're going to exit from oil and gas and the petrochemical sector, but still have their business running, but really from renewable energy, solar panels, windmills, etc., so forth. So that's the kind of perspective that we want, the country to go in, to come up with a roadmap of when they're going to reduce oil and gas and go after renewable energy in a phased way. Yeah. Not arbitrary. Okay.
That's right.
Right. Yeah. And that is really what the current worry is. So, okay, so I will.
Can I just handle that other question then, Prof? From David Abdullah. Thank you.
Yeah.
Yeah. So the question is about, I think it's just gone off. Are we doing enough? What more needs to be done? As we're all aware, the Environmental Management Authority has that sort of overarching responsibility, but the responsibility to a large extent in Trinidad and Tobago really is a bit fragmented in that coastal areas, rivers, land-based pollution and sort of solid waste collection of waste and so on. There's a number of agencies that really need to be brought together. And I think we need to tackle it from the top. We need to really work at ensuring that all the agencies are working together. So it's not that easy sometimes, because of course you get permission, for example, to release something in the environment from one agency, but of course in a very localized area, it's not something that should have been done. So the thing is, we really need to sit together and get agencies to take responsibility. And I think that's really what we need to do. We have all the laws, we have all the regulations, we have the policies in place, and we have an environmental management authority sitting at the top. But it's really just tightening up the links, I would say, to getting it to work. But I have no doubt it can work.
Okay, so there's another question that's popped up.
Prof, hold on, please.
Yes,
May I?
sir. Go ahead.
I have a slightly different take on that response to Mr. Abdullah, in that one of the things I see is the fact that we are, as a country, we as a region, is not educated to understand the potential in trash. There are lots of business opportunities that exist in trash. And if we were to look at that, like for example, almost 40% of our trash is actually organic. That's a great potential for composting, a composting business. You have a lot of plastics, a lot of metals, a lot of paper. If you could extract all of these and should I say, develop a proper recycling or upcycling business, or even energy business. For I believe in the Bahamas, there's a power plant that is actually run on garbage. Then we could stop a lot of what you're seeing in terms of what's happening in the rivers and ended up in the oceans. That's my take on it.
Okay. Agreed, Ruel. I just wanted to add there, though, but the question was about what can be done by the regulatory agencies. But I totally agree with you. There is the option for that development. Absolutely. And that could be private or public.
Yeah, or public, yeah.
Well, there's some collaboration going on with Point Lisa's company, ProMan, to see how gas from waste and stuff could be harnessed to turn into energy. That's out of the Faculty of Engineering at UWI.
Sure.
Okay, so, all right, let me just pass the next question on to you, Ruel. This is from Raymond Prasad. Is there a short to medium term resource mobilization policy stroke strategy with clear demarcation of roles for the government, communities, and private sector to support the intentions and or plan for the blue economy in Trinidad and Tobago? That's essentially more or less what you were just talking about.
Yeah, but I guess he is pulling on what's happening with WIPO. Presently, WIPO is or has decided to target the practitioners, the people who are on the ground, who are actually operating in the blue economy in the short term. Because one of the major things is that, like for example, Compete Caribbean had a call for projects earlier this year. They extended it twice, and they were still unable to give grants to anyone in the region because nobody could have come up with a proper business idea to qualify for it. So what WIPO is doing is looking at the environment, looking at the practitioners and developing the education interventions in order to give the practitioners the tools to be able to develop their businesses to qualify for the money. One part of it is also looking at the type of rubric that the financiers are using to assess the blue economy practitioner. And so that will also be developed and given to the financial agencies so that when somebody in the blue economy brings a project forward, they would be assessed differently from traditional commercial people for finances. So that's the short term. In terms of the medium term, what happens beyond that? It's really getting the university and all the different faculties involved and getting us to work together, because there are a lot of opportunities from a technological perspective. Like for example, I could give you a simple example. Growing of kingfish. There's a market in the US where kingfish is being sold for 30 US a kilogram. However, we can grow kingfish in cages. How do we, but kingfish grows at a certain depth. We have nobody researching how do you get the eggs, how do you spawn the kingfish, how do you get them into the cages, get them into the ocean, feed them, grow them, harvest them, and then process them and sell them. We don't have any of that taking place, that research taking place. But there's just so many opportunities that we keep missing because we are not working together in a holistic way. I hope that answers your question.
Yes, well, okay, that's the direction that we want the country to go in. The country that is making a lot of progress is Barbados, and they are funded by IDB, and had competitions for people to send in ideas and stuff, in which they then, sponsor them, in fact. So I'm just saying we need to go in the same direction. There's another question. This is one to Dr. Nikisha Spencer. It says from Pradeep Mathura, I noticed Barbados was not listed under the monetary loss. Understanding you chose a set of countries, is it because they are doing what needs to be done?
Well, the countries that I presented, of course, the table could have been much larger, but I just chose the countries who would have the highest losses. But Barbados, of course, will encounter losses. Based on my kind of sideways, they would have about less than 30% losses, right? But I don't know if they're totally doing what they're supposed to do. But in one of my references, when doing the discussion on what measures could be taken, I noticed that some paper that was done by my crew in 2014 stated that Barbados, for instance, new buildings are required to be located at least 30 meters away from areas that are deemed to be at risk from erosion. So they're actually doing something already. I cannot say if that is why their figure is so low. And I'm going to say that, they are already doing everything. But of course, they are losing, or they will be losing, and nobody wants to lose. So of course, there is room for doing more things, right? But I did find that nice piece of reference to say that they actually have some rule that where the buildings have to be located, right? So that could be one thing, right? But they certainly have some work to do in terms of protecting your income.
Let me just add to that. In Barbados, in order to keep the hotels full, Barbados has said that you could get a visa to stay. If you're coming from England or something, which is cold, you could go to Barbados, which is warm, and we have beaches, and you could work remotely, and you could stay for a year. Okay? That is a very marketing gimmick that has kept the hotels full. You'll be buying food, you'll be taking transport, you'll be doing so and so. That's how they have kept their economy running. It was a clever idea, in fact, okay, to not avoid the tourism loss that they were anticipated because of COVID. So those are the kinds of ideas we need countries to come up with, to be innovative, and not stick with where they were, and to come up with clever, innovative ideas to keep the economy running. So, yes, I'm just seeing another question.
I think there's a comment, Prof, from David Abdullah. Well, there was a comment about the lobster farms that Cuba has been engaging in. So,
yes.
Yeah, I mean, I just wanted to add a comment, if I may, to that we also, I guess that's the science, balancing the science and the research. I'm going to suggest there's some caution when it comes to the type of mariculture that we engage in Trinidad and Tobago. And there needs to be some more we need to do, as Ruel suggested earlier. We need to get the scientific research done properly, because you can invest, and that goes alongside with the investment, because you can invest in something quite heavily, like lobster farming, and then because it was not researched properly, it gets eradicated. For example, with the comment that's just made about lionfish and things like that. So there needs to be that balancing, but I also want to suggest that it needs the backing of the government in the first instance, and of course the backing of the private sector as well, for investors to get involved in these kinds of activities. And I'm going to suggest that we stay local and not consider temperate sort of culturing.
Yes, so yes, those are good ideas. And I'm seeing the comment about the lionfish farming, because I think through the Institute of Marine Affairs, they came up with a strategy for dealing with the lionfish farming and also for encouraging people to go out on reefs and kill them as well, okay? Because they're an invasive species. And there's a cookbook about how to cook lionfish, okay? So all of those are the kind of innovative ideas that we need to push and more people to come up with those ideas. Okay, so I think it's 3:30 and we've taken up our hour. If there are no further questions, I can hand back over to the chair so we can bring the meeting to an end. So I see Malini Maharaj is online, so over to you, Chair.
Thank you, Professor Agard and panelists. So that brings us to the conclusion of day 2. I would like to invite and remind all of our attendees to our day 3 presentations, which continues this discourse of building a post-COVID Caribbean by exploring the topics tomorrow on new agriculture and agribusiness, energy and renewable energy, and very importantly, where do we go from here? With that, I would like to end day 2 by thanking all of our panelists and participants for a successful day. Have a safe and good afternoon all.
Good afternoon. Bye.
Thank you.